everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely crucial. We are going to track the undeniable, real-world impacts of environmental degradation. But we're not just going to focus on the problem. We're also mapping out the exact rules, the scientific measurements, and the massive technological breakthroughs that can actually serve as a catalyst for a sustainable Earth.
So, here's our roadmap for the journey. First up, Section 1, the Environmental Rulebook. Then we'll hit Section 2, the Resource Crisis. After that, it's Section 3, Measuring Our True Impact. And we'll wrap things up with Section 4, Powering a Sustainable Future.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the Environmental Rulebook.
Now, before we get into all the legal stuff, we really need to define what exactly it is we're trying to protect. Legally speaking, the environment isn't just pristine forests and deep oceans. It's an interconnected web, and it explicitly includes human-shaped elements and infrastructure. By defining it this broadly, we actually establish the legal grounds necessary to regulate human resource use on a massive, systemic scale. And to protect that massive web, society has forged some heavy-duty legal shields. We're talking about the Environment Protection Act, along with highly specific water, air, wildlife, and forest conservation acts. But listen, these aren't just polite suggestions. They are strictly enforced with massive financial fines, the power to completely shut down non-compliant businesses, and even up to 5 years of imprisonment for severe polluters. They're designed to hold people accountable. Taking a step back and looking at the global stage, two landmark treaties really stand out. Back in 1987, the Montreal Protocol specifically targeted the nasty chemicals that were destroying our ozone layer. Then, exactly 10 years later, the Kyoto Protocol stepped up to lay the groundwork for modern climate policy by targeting greenhouse gases. So, Montreal successfully saved the ozone, while Kyoto literally forced industrialized nations to commit to limiting their emissions.
And that early momentum essentially paved the way for the COP meetings, or the Conference of the Parties. This is the forward push of global climate policy. It all started by setting the stage in Berlin in '95, led directly to that historic Kyoto Protocol in '97, achieved incredible global consensus in Paris in 2015, and accelerated real action in Glasgow in 2021. Every single one of these meetings builds a tighter, stronger platform for global accountability. Okay, moving right along to Section 2, the Resource Crisis. One of the fastest growing environmental crises is literally sitting right in our pockets and on our desks right now. I'm talking about e-waste. We absolutely cannot just toss our obsolete tech into the regular trash because hazardous toxins will just leach straight into the soil. Safely managing this requires a massive, complex logistical chain. It goes from setting up dedicated collection points and secure transport to meticulous manual and mechanical processing, recovering precious materials like gold, and finally, making sure the hazardous leftovers are safely disposed of. But what happens when a resource doesn't just get mismanaged, but actually starts running completely dry? Well, a pretty terrifying reality is that water scarcity breeds very real conflict. We see this happening in India with the incredibly tense Kaveri River dispute over irrigation and drinking water. And we see it internationally in the Nile Basin, where a dam in Ethiopia has sparked high-stakes geopolitical tension with Egypt and Sudan. When groundwater depletes and rivers run low, the fight for survival really begins. And it's a very similar story right beneath our feet. Land degradation is literally stripping away our fertile soil, and human activity is absolutely the primary culprit here. Chopping down forests, letting livestock overgraze, relying on harsh, unsustainable agriculture, rapid urbanization, and aggressive mining. Every single one of these actions fractures the soil structure, accelerates a devastating loss of biodiversity, and directly threatens global agriculture. Which brings us to Section 3, Measuring Our True Impact. Check this out. 26 tons versus 4 kilograms. It's wild, right? This completely forces us to confront the massive scale of individual carbon footprints. Creating a simple cotton t-shirt generates about 4 kilograms of CO2 emissions from the moment it's made to the time it hits your closet. But a luxury SUV? Over 26 tons. Every single product we buy leaves a very real, measurable trail of greenhouse gases behind it. So how do scientists actually calculate those crazy numbers? They use something called a life cycle assessment, or LCA for short. Think of it as a comprehensive 4-step audit. First, you define exactly what you're measuring in the goal and scope. Second, you tally up every single energy and material input across the inventory. Third, you translate that into actual environmental damage during the impact assessment. And fourth, interpretation, figuring out exactly where a product can become greener.
It's a full audit from raw material extraction all the way to the landfill. Now, once we can accurately measure those emissions, we can actually start trading them using carbon credits. A carbon credit is basically a tradable certificate that represents the right to emit exactly 1 ton of CO2. By putting a hard cap on total emissions and letting companies buy and sell these credits, we've created a literal, verifiable financial market. It turns reducing emissions from a nice feel-good idea into a highly profitable, heavily incentivized business decision.
And that leads us to some optimism in Section 4, Powering a Sustainable Future.
Okay, so we've measured the impact. Now let's look at how biology is stepping up to build a cleaner world. Enter anaerobic digestion. This is the process of turning organic waste, like sewage, directly into usable biogas and electricity. Think of it as an incredible biological machine operating in 4 completely oxygen-free stages. First, hydrolysis breaks down complex molecules. Then acidogenesis turns them into fatty acids. Next, acetogenesis creates acetic acid. And finally, methanogenesis produces methane gas. It's amazing because it solves a waste problem and an energy problem all at the exact same time. Or, get this, we can literally grow our fuel. Taking sugarcane and turning it into lower-emission ethanol is a fascinating 5-step journey. First, you harvest the cane. Then you crush it to extract all that sweet juice. After that, you use yeast for fermentation to turn sugars into ethanol, distill the whole mixture to separate the alcohol, and finally, put it through dehydration for absolute purity. And because the sugarcane absorbs CO2 while it's growing, burning this ethanol results in a significantly smaller net footprint than your traditional fossil fuels. Now, when we look at the cars actually out on the road, the environmental perks of electric vehicles, or EVs, are undeniable. We're talking zero tailpipe emissions and drastically less noise pollution compared to those fossil fuel-dependent conventional vehicles. However, to be totally fair and look at the complete picture, we do have to acknowledge the hurdles EVs still face. Specifically, the environmental degradation caused by mining lithium and cobalt and the ongoing global challenge of safely disposing of those massive batteries. Finally, let's just look up. Harnessing the sun is probably our most critical, absolutely zero-emission solution to meet the globe's growing energy demand. And there are 2 main ways we capture it. Photovoltaic, or PV cells, those are the classic solar panels you see on roofs. They convert sunlight directly into electricity. But then there's concentrated solar power, or CSP, which uses huge arrays of mirrors to concentrate sunlight, generate extreme heat, and drive a turbine. Both of these methods tap into a beautifully abundant, completely renewable resource. And wow, that brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's recap. We have the legal shields securely in place. We had the precise scientific metrics to measure our exact environmental impact. And we have incredibly powerful, expanding technologies like biogas, ethanol, EVs, and solar power right at our fingertips. We essentially know exactly what to do. So the only question left to ask yourself is, how fast can we act? Thanks so much for joining me on